Hello and welcome to Talking Automotive with Mark and John. My name is John Sinclair and my co-host Mark Palavestra.
Hi John. Today we go down the HR, recruitment and human capital side of the auto industry and business in general. We've got Dean Courtenay, who is a director of Quadrant Recruitment.
Now, Dean takes us through some of the many pitfalls that companies go through in doing recruitment.
If you like what you hear today, remember to subscribe and ring the bell down below on our YouTube channel. Listen to us on Spotify and iTunes and follow us on our website, autocurrents.com. Let's get into it.
With 30 years' experience in auto logistics and state-of-the-art locations in 5 major Australian cities, Precar Fleet Services is an independent division of Precar Services, offering specialty fleet fit-outs for commercial applications ranging from simple tray and tow bar fitments to fully bespoke service body and accessory installation. With quality-assured safety, compliance and standardisation of vehicle builds, Precar Fleet Services are a premier all-in-one solutions provider for commercial vehicle fleet operators, leasing companies and original equipment manufacturers. For further information on how Precar Fleet Services can assist in solving your commercial vehicle fit-out needs, please visit precar.com.au and click on the link to Fleet Services.
Modera is a cloud-based AI-powered CRM and retail platform aimed at digitizing the physical process of selling a car. The Modera platform sits between existing automotive dealer and OEM systems, providing car dealerships a quick and easy shift to digital ways of working, all done entirely digitally and with total ease.
Okay, hi Dean, welcome to the show. Great to have you on. To start with, can you tell us about Quadrant and what are the type of services you offer?
Thank you, John. Quadrant People Resources has been around a number of years and we specialise in recruiting, search, and we also have a reasonably strong HR support to our business. We work nationally. We work from the senior management, general manager level through to skilled operators. We've had a lot of success. We've had one key customer we have a service level agreement with that's continuing after many years.
Now, Dean, where do you see the state of play in hiring at present? Like we've gone through this massive COVID shock. Everyone's sort of panicked and either put people off or haven't hired people if they were going to hire. Where do you see the state of play right now in the almost post-COVID environment?
I think our current situation is more than COVID. I'm Melbourne. I'm in the world's longest lockdown. It's frustrating. We still have work. But if you look at things that are happening in the States, in China or Taiwan and so on, and the lockdown and the extension, and I think today we had over 2,000 new cases, people are scared. People are wanting to stay put. An example, I was looking for a senior skilled person technical role recently, which a couple of years ago you would have got 50, 60, 70 applications for. I advertised and I've got 4 so far, one of whom is an international person who's not eligible to work here. The government is saying the number of ads is at a record high. It's at a record high because people aren't responding. It's really flat. It's really hard to find good people. For a good person who wants a good job and to change, and has a bit of courage, it's a great time. You can get out there, you will get the interviews, you're available. I'm not seeing that going to change for a little while. We come out of lockdown. The governments are talking about spike in hospitalisations and so on. People will remain concerned. They want to see that it's going to settle down. They want it to get better. Absolutely. We all want it to get better. There's a lot of uncertainty amongst people. People are playing it safe. They're staying. The job they have is the best job at the moment. And there's a couple of things that reinforce that. If you're in a current job, then you are accruing annual leave, you have sick leave, you have protections under Fair Work. You move into a new job, you're going to start on a probation, which is going to be 6 months, almost certainly. That's the Fair Work standard. 1 week notice. Yes, you accrue annual leave and sick leave for the time you're there, but you have nowhere near the same confidence of remaining in the job going forward. The opportunity in that, though, is about, I suppose, in recruiting, where Quadrant can come in, it's you know your market, you know your market space, you know people, you're in a trusted position, you contact people because you have a database and you say, hey, Mark, there's a really good job coming up over here. It's with so-and-so organisation. And you know I'm not fishing. You know it's not a bullshit role.
And with the impacts of the borders being closed, for many of those roles at entry level, they would have been filled by internationals. So, we look in the auto business, a lot of the technicians and even say in the other associated industrial space, manufacturing, etc., a lot of those roles would be serviced by internationals or lower skilled individuals. Now, it's hard to get those people right now because they're not here. We don't have the backpackers doing the pub jobs. We don't have the backpackers doing the fruit picking. So it's a knock-on effect that we seem to have a layer, if you like, of employees that haven't been here for almost 2 years. Well, where do you see that picture? Is the closing of the border of Australia to international impeding the like of the flow, or is that just independent of?
I'm working currently in another industry sector. It is having some significant impact. I've got an example of a skilled tradesperson who is living in Wagga, is doing higher level qualifications in instrumentation and automation, has applied for a job in Melbourne's northern suburbs. A really good candidate, but it's really hard for that person to have a site-based interview and see the site. That's a real practical limitation on it. If they come down here, they've got to go through a quarantine, isolation period. They go back, they've got to go into an isolation period. So it's got to be a real commitment. From an employer point of view, they need to, perhaps to get the person to have approval currently to cross borders, they need to have either a letter of offer or something. The employer is not going to give a letter of offer until the person's seen the site, actually met the person. I think organisations that rely on backpackers and that can't really complain they have high turnover. An organisation needs to also look after itself. Organisations in the industry put a lot of effort into enhancing their brand. Well, they also need to enhance their employment brand. They need to be seen to be the best employer. And it's not just about paying money. They need to pay fair money, but it's about how they're treated, how they're respected, what type of respect and support they have. Is some training involved and upskilling in the person so you can kind of have a bit of a golden handcuffs, on someone for a period of time. Employment brand, I think, is something that employers forget. The market, employees don't forget that. They know, I think we all know who are not good employers, and we don't want to go there.
Following on from what the question Mark asked, do you think this whole reliance on being able to bring in technicians from overseas, it's made us vulnerable because the companies haven't spent time in developing their own network and they've forgotten how to do that? Do you think that's damaged the market at all?
Made businesses vulnerable, absolutely. When I first started Human Resources Industrial Relations role, it was a major organisation. We had a very, very extensive apprenticeship intake. That has just pretty well gone right across the board. People were indentured, they worked there 3-4 years, whatever it was. Most organisations then let the person go or didn't rehire them. But you had a choice of picking, if you like. But if you didn't take them, then there was a skilled person available in the marketplace. I think that lack of focus on apprenticeships and traineeships has been a major issue. All the rorts that have gone on with registered training organisations and governments offloading their responsibility to RTOs and not managing the relationship has also really, really damaged things. It's cost a lot of money and given us maybe more hairdressers than we need. At least if employers are doing it and if they're supported, it's for a specified, identified need. I'm looking for skilled technicians at the moment and they're pretty rare in some of these areas. Recently, I was looking for skilled people. COVID has actually opened up a whole new market people who are in the FIFO, fly in, fly out, in the northwest on the gas projects and the pipelines and so on. Quite a lot of those people were young tradespeople, their late 20s, early 30s. They weren't able to fly back to family, to partners, to children without having to go through 14-day quarantines and so on. Recently, we had multiple roles, 5 roles in a large organisation, and they were filled by almost your identical 32-year-old person, highly skilled, just bought a home, wants to have a family or has young children and wants to be here. It's not all bad, but we do need more people. We do need more skills. And the borders being shut has certainly prevented new people coming in.
Now, Dean, what are the common mistakes that organisations make when they're recruiting?
One is, I suppose, we recruit people, or they recruit people who are like themselves. So you don't get that diversity, you don't get that challenge and varied thinking in the organisation. They try to cut the process short. Now, I'm all for a nice, crisp process, but you need to go through things. For example, some roles must have a police check. If you've got someone going into a finance type role, a credit role, you've got to give that person a police check. If you need an auto electrician or a qualified mechanic, do they actually have the trade qualification actually done that check? We recruit people that we like or are similar to the people around us or similar to ourselves, and not seek to get that. I use the term diversity. I'm not talking about having a whole mixture of ethnicities necessarily, but if you have diverse range of thought and challenge in the organisation, that's a real positive. I think the other thing too is, from a recruiter point of view, don't go and talk to 4 or 5 recruiters or 3 recruiters and say, I'm looking for this type of role. If they know that you've talked to other people, then they're only going to give you lip service. If they know they've got the job exclusive, they will work hard. If they don't deliver, move on, sack them, go to someone else. But I think, again, it's about managing a relationship. I think some people think that it's all about dollars. Some people perhaps a little bit mean.
Dean, that diversity is a really interesting thing, because there's been a lot of research saying the more your organization reflects society, the more chance you have of it being successful.
Actually, John, you raise a very good point. I'd like to add to the point that you raised, because yes, you have to match the audience, not so much the community, but you need to match your market. Now, if you sell to grey-haired old men, you need to be able to relate to those grey-haired old men. So that's where you need a few grey-haired older people to communicate with those individuals and engage. So if you go the other way around, if you have a lot of younger people trying to sell to grey-haired old men, the grey-haired old men tend to be a bit sceptical of that audience or that segment that's trying to sell to them. So you need that balance. Now, Dean, a question that I was keen to ask you. So you talked about recruiting and making sure that you don't have you don't just go for the technical skills. How important is cultural fit?
Cultural fit's essential. I really, really look for in a person is, do they want the job? Are they motivated? Do they show the motivation? So, for example, when someone knows who the client is, who the organisation is, and if they've not done any research on it, again, it depends on the level of the role, they're shooting themselves in the foot. I've got multiple clients who'll say, Dean, okay, we need a qualification. Okay, if we're talking that, got to have a qualification. That's great. But if it's not as good as we would like to have or something, that's not so important as long as the fit is right. And fit equals, a culture and a cultural affinity and so on. You can learn a technical skill. You can expand that. But if we don't have the right attitude and approach to the way we work, then you're not only not helping, you're potentially being quite disruptive to the rest of the people who are in the team. No, it's absolutely essential. But within the caveat, if you need a particular skill and set of experience, you've got to have that. That gets you through the door, so to speak, but the decision then is about the person who has the best fit.
Nadine, what are the risks of an organisation if they get the decision wrong?
I did some research a few years ago. It depends on the role. If you're going into a sales director role or a business, kind of dealer director type role, and you are the wrong person for it, then that can have devastating impact on that dealership, on that business. The cost is a lot more than maybe 6 months or 12 months that you've persevered with the person because you've made a call. Most people say, oh, they need a bit more guidance, I'll give them a bit more time and so on. But over that period of time, potentially damage key clients, damage the brand. It could be multiple times the cost of their salary. On top of, if you do a termination, is there litigation around the termination? Was it fairly done? Do you have legals? All that type of stuff. So that in actual dollars can be very significant. In actual time impact on the business can be really, really a burden. Then you go further into the organisation where you have someone who's maybe a customer support role or a CSO type role, customer service officer, still can really impact. The cost is in the damage they do to the customer, potentially much more so than the actual loss of salary and maybe the cost of having to go back to a recruiter and get another recruiter or the time taken advertising and going through the process yourself. A lot of people have just looked at the actual, you paid a recruiter so much, you got to do it again. I've got to pay the person out an extra month's notice or something for nothing. They didn't work out. Why am I doing that? I think it's really important to think of that broader impact on the business, regardless of where the person is.
Now, just following on for that, what percentage of recruitment do companies get wrong? Is it a big percentage or is it a very small percentage?
Some of the large recruiters just throw resumes at people. A recruiter, and you're not necessarily talking a recruiter, but a recruiter would be on quite a low salary. They would be given KPIs around the number of phone calls they had to make and the number of resumes they submit. And it was that type of KPI rather than rewarding a successful outcome. So if a client organisation is getting pretty rubbishy type support, then it's going to be hard for them to get really good outcomes.
What does a good recruitment game plan look like?
I think it's really essential to know the client and to understand the client. Position description is always handy, but that they tend to be somewhat aseptic and standardised. I can go to Australian Institute of Management salary survey and here's job description. What I ask the person, what are the 3 or 4 things that are absolutely critical for this person to do? And you ask some questions around the culture. But if you've continued to work with an organisation, you've then grown with that organisation and you'll have that innate understanding. So really important to have a good understanding of your client and to seek to do that as best you can. The process that we use, you will advertise. You'll go through a Seek or a LinkedIn or maybe an industry area. You will seek to also use a database. It could be your own database, depending on how much you've been working in the area. A database needs to be current. A really old one with lots of names in that's kind of unnecessary and you won't get many good hits on that. You then contact and you interact with those people. You find out what they want. And we do that by telephone screening. You're shortlisted into a group of people and pre-COVID, we would meet with all those people. With COVID, we're using Teams or Zoom or WebEx or whatever to have detailed discussion. They're not quite as good. My experience is that we haven't been quite as incisive in using a screen as we were in actually meeting with the people, but we're getting better at it. But you got to meet the person. You got to see them and so on. There are a couple of core questions you need to get to understand the person and what it is they are looking for. Yes, people use behavioural interviews and some really rigorous process, online testing, and that's all very helpful, very valuable. But you've also got to know the person. What, as best you can, what makes them tick? Why are they looking to move their jobs? Why did they move some of the other jobs? As best you can, you try to have a dialogue. And again, depending on the level of the job, that discussion becomes more and more important. You then provide guidance to the client. And I try very hard to do a summary and send the resume to the client. But in that summary, it's a table that compares the 3, the 4, the 5, the candidate, however many candidates you feel have kind of met their criteria, and you make your commentary on them. You then discuss it with your client, and they may have questions around why you said certain things. So you talk to that. They will meet with the person. They will meet maybe initially through a Zoom or something. Then they'll be on site and so on. And then you go through maybe a medical, maybe there's a police check, maybe you've certainly got to do referees. And I think you've got to have at least 2 referees. And you actually talk about what the person's done. Quite a number of recruiters have a referee or reference checklist. Did they work there? Yes. Did they do this? Yes. Did they turn up on time? Yes, yeah. That's a nonsense. You've got to have a dialogue, particularly at a senior level. And then you stay with the candidate. Again, it depends. I mean, if you're recruiting 100 kind of people of the same level, it's a bit hard to do that. But if you're involved with the dealer principal or a sales director or a general manager or something, then you want to contact the person a few weeks in. How's it going, Mark? And John, if you're the dealer principal, you say, well, how's it going with Mark? Is there any feedback you want to give? And continue that dialogue. And then I'll say, when you're having the profile, when you're having a review, is that happening? Usually keep doing that for, again, depending on the level, for 1 or 2 months. For a junior level role, it'd be less than that. But certainly for a senior role, you'd be going through a little while, touching base. So you stay in touch.
It's a very detailed plan that you go through, and that's how Quadrant offers a professional service to partner with the business owners or the hiring organisation or the individuals in that organisation, and also with the individuals that are seeking roles. So that is very much the Quadrant difference, if I may summarise that.
We like to say we partner with organisations. I do like partnering. We've got long-term relationships. I sulk if I lose a relationship. You stay the course. You invest for the longer term. I think partnering is great. It also helps you get the next job and the next job and so on. It's very satisfying if I can have a one-on-one dialogue with the leader of a business and you're making sense. You're expanding their thinking. You're challenging maybe their view, and they listen to you. And it takes time to build that level of trust.
I think, Dean, you're right. The challenge is for an organisation, they're not professional recruiters. So if you're going in and looking for a person, having someone of your expertise, you know how to do those job interviews. You know how to screen the person's background to identify things which I probably would never pick up. You've got a very short time, even if you go through 2 or 3 rounds of interviews, you've got an hour at each interview, and it's very difficult to really pick up things, whereas you're a professional in that area, so you could identify those things and maybe point them out where I would never pick them up.
I personally tend to focus on the non-technical. If I'm recruiting someone into a finance role, never come to me for financial advice. Just do not do that. But if I know the type of person they're looking for, if I have, as I think Mark was asking earlier about culture, if you have a sense of the type of person who will work within and contribute to that culture, maybe grow it, challenge it a little bit, still fit's really important, then that's what I seek to do, and seems to work. The clients we have, they say, yes, we'd like you to come on board. You demonstrate a flexibility too. We are not dogmatic about the types of fees we charge and so on. If you want to do part of it and we do part of it, absolutely. It's about building that relationship, satisfying the need, solving the problem. Absolutely. The problem being the lack of the resource, the skill that's required. It can be done together. It can be done by us.
Now, Dean, question for me. The industry, the recruitment industry, seems to have a stigma to it. Like the car business has had a stigma, but you hear time and time again from professionals and other individuals that the recruiters don't seem to genuinely care for the applicant. You see many comments on LinkedIn, saying that recruiters are, horrible people. They just care about the next sale. They really don't care about the person they're working with, or they don't return calls or emails, and they leave people out on a limb or just totally in the lurch. What are your thoughts on those statements? And are there recruiters like that? And how do you differentiate from that?
Second last question. Absolutely, there are recruiters like that. I think we can all say, yes, there are recruiters like that at a personal level, because I wasn't always a recruiter. I think I mentioned earlier that some recruiting firms, some quite large recruiting firms, pay people a very small retainer almost, individual contracts, and they're then paid according to hitting certain KPIs. So it's about numbers to quite a number of recruiting firms. Quite a number of recruiting firms won't share the data of the candidate with the client. Now, if the client is someone who's going to then go and run away and steal your candidate, well, you're not going to work with them again. If you're getting hundreds of emails a day, and that can happen, not so much during COVID, not at the moment, but if you're getting hundreds of emails a day about a particular job. I was with one organisation way back when I was doing HR support, and they were in the events management sector. They were doing a World Masters Games recruiting for 2 event managers. They had over 1,000 applications for those 2 roles. You can't have 1,000 phone calls. You have hundreds of people phoning up and saying, tell me about the job. And you think, well, read the bloody ad. There is so much an individual can, take like that. That doesn't happen all the time, but it certainly can. It can occur still with customer service type roles, front of house type roles, where there's a lot of people floating through the marketplace. One of the things Quadrant does is, let's say you use Seek. On Seek, you can send out an email to all candidates. You can build into the system automated acknowledgement. I want our people, and I do myself, phone all the candidates I think are pretty close to the mark. Now, it might be a 5-minute conversation, and I also tell them the truth. If I think they're not suitable for the role, I say, we're looking for someone like this. Thank you very much. If you're down to a short list of 4 or 5 people and they've all been interviewed and it looks like it's going to go from that to maybe between 2, I will tell the other 3 that they're not going forward at this stage. How far down the process you've gone, you need to then adjust the amount of communication you have with the person. The frustration I've had where the client won't make a decision. They won't make a decision because they're coming towards the end of the month or the end of the quarter. They're going through the numbers. A new boss has come. Something has happened that's pushed back the decision to take someone on. So I don't know about that. I've got a skilled candidate who might go elsewhere. So I push to try to get advice for the person. If I know nothing, I will tell the person, I'm trying, but I know nothing. So you try to maintain a strong connection with those people. As they say, shit happens and it doesn't go through sometimes.
Well, Dean, thanks for coming on the show today. You've shared some pretty interesting information and some insights into the whole recruiting process. And I'm keen, if I may, summarise to some of the things that we chatted about, because when we look at Quadrant and Quadrant, the organisation, very much about recruitment and HR support and search, finding roles from GM all the way down through to skilled operators and all the roles in between. And what you're seeing in the state of play right now is with this uncertainty and the uncertainty of the last 18 months, there's been this trend for people to stay put because they're playing it safe. If you were to leave, you make some very good points. If you were to leave right now, in the back of your mind, you're thinking, I'll have to go through another probation period. I could be dismissed within that first 6 months. I'll lose annual leave. I've got to start afresh, accruing new annual leave, new sick leave. So there's risk in changing right now. However, there is always a natural cycle of people changing, which has probably been a little bit lower than normal for that very playing it safe situation. But then we've had closed borders, and it's actually hard to get people to move. And you highlight an instance where even just within the local borders that are closed, let alone the international borders that are closed, that getting people to go from one state to the next for a role, you might have a fantastic candidate, but they've got to go through 14 days of quarantine. And that's a barrier to someone physically looking at a role and accepting it. And then we talked about and we looked at the common mistakes that are made in recruitment. And the number one, which you mentioned, I thought was very strong, is that people recruit people like themselves. So you replicate who you are, and you miss out on this beautiful thing called diversity of thought and diversity of input into the business and skills. And the other thing is that they don't necessarily look at the brand. They need to be the employer brand. They have their marketing brand and their business brand, but they don't have their employer brand. So making sure they pay the right money. They don't have to pay over the odds, but they've got to be a satisfier from a financial perspective. But the motivators come into play when we look at Maslow and Hertzberg, those that studied management, is the need for recognition and being treated appropriately, trained and upskilled, and having a sense of belonging to the business. So then you talked about the other mistakes that are made are some of the basics of not doing police checks or even qualification checks, and then finding out the true motives of the individual as to why they want to join your organisation, and making sure the attitudes are right so that they get the right fit. So when you look at those mistakes, and then the risks are significant because you can ruin the business, you can disenfranchise other individuals in the business, and it costs you money. And if you make the mistake of not putting an appropriate skilled person in, or a person who's a fraudster in, well, there you go. You can have legal issues ahead of you as well. And then you looked at what is a good recruiting plan. And the good recruiting plan is very much the quantum plan. So when you look at it, it's essential to know who the client is. And it's, as a business, it's essential to know who you are. So if you think I need to employ someone, I really need to be clear as to who I am and what my business is, because I need to be able to communicate to the person that I want to bring in so that they can understand what my expectations will be of them, because I need to understand and be very clear, because I can assume all day long what my expectations are, but without actually being clear on myself. And this is where the job of a recruiter like yourself comes into play, because you will actually bring that out and have structure. Then there's the answer the question of the 3 or 4 things that you really need that are critical for that person to do. What are those critical factors that person is? Advertising, using databases, but the database has to be accurate. It can't be an old school database that's out of date from 6-7 years ago, because everything's moved since then. Time has changed, people have changed. But then you really highlighted the need for a face-to-face plan. Like Zoom is fantastic, but there is still a need once we can to be able to be face-to-face, to get a real understanding of who this person is and the body language and the other idiosyncrasies to tell whether this person is the appropriate fit or not, because that's when we can really draw on our primal instincts to say, yes, this person really gives me the right fit and right vibe. But then it's overarching structure and giving them guidelines, but also following up and giving a summary to the client as to these are the people I think would be best for the role, because I understand the role, I understand the people, and I've checked them. This is what I feel, these are the people you should be up for. And then once they've been employed, you stay in contact with that individual and the client. So to make sure both are A, happy with what they're doing, and B, if there's any issues, you are working with them on those. So it's that 360 degree of you found the person, but you want to make sure they stay. Because recruiting is one thing, getting the right person is fantastic. Getting them to stay is another challenge in itself. And you give your clients the best possible chance to get the best possible person and get them the best possible outcome by making sure that individual stays with them, because everyone's clear on what everyone's expectations are and making sure that they are the appropriate fit from an individual perspective, personality and behaviour, but also from a skills and knowledge perspective. Have I missed anything?
Excellent. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, John.
Anyone who is looking to hire someone needs to reach out to you, Dan, because you are a true business partner. And that is the key. And this is what we talked about at the very end. There are recruiters, and then there are recruiters that are business partners. Now, we in the auto industry are classic as far as the cheap. Everyone says, "Oh, we just got to go the cheapest," but that's not true, because we in the auto industry know that we don't sell the cheapest cars. Not all, and in fact, my marketing lecturer told me, Marketing 101 was said, "Mark, tell me a product that's the cheapest, that's market leader." Because people don't go for the cheapest. They actually, ultimately, the majority of organisations and individuals go for what provides them the best value. And that is where it comes down to having someone who cares about my business, which is what you do. Thanks for listening. Hopefully you got as much out of today's session with Dean as we did. HR and recruitment really is a minefield if you get it wrong, but it is an absolute windfall if you get it right. If you like what you heard today, remember to subscribe to our channel on YouTube, follow us on LinkedIn, and download your podcasts on Spotify and iTunes. And you can find out more information on our website, autocurrents.com.